We're going to go ahead and call the Education Committee to order. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Bratton.
Here.
Hudson.
Here.
Gregory.
Here.
Henderson.
Here.
Nurnberg.
Here.
Schroer.
Here.
Weber.
Quorum being established, so we have a lighter schedule today, so we only have two bills that we're going to be hearing. So we're going to kick it off with you, Senator Henderson, with your Senate Bill 1558. You can begin when you are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. For the record, Mike Henderson, State Senator from the 3rd Senatorial District, presenting Senate Bill 1558. This bill has two straightforward components. The first, it provides a legal protection for private schools that require students to use bathrooms by the gender listed on their birth certificate. Under this bill, a private school could not be sued solely for maintaining this type of bathroom policy, with exceptions listed in the bill. And it gives some of the things like for if there's an emergency and somebody has to enter, and some things to try to make sure we're not catching anybody up, and that is listed in the bill. The second part is the bill protects private schools from regulations imposed by local political subdivisions that would go against the school's policy. It prevents cities, counties, or other local governments from adopting ordinances that would force a private school to change its bathroom policy. It's a political subdivision. If a political subdivision does pass an ordinance that conflicts with a private school's policy, the subdivision would be responsible for covering the school's attorney fees associated with defending their policy. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator, for the bill. Any questions for the Senator? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Okay, so I see that you have some exemptions here, essentially allowing a parent or a guardian to accompany their child. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you have the age of 8 or younger. Is there a reason why you use the age 8?
I think it was the idea that you know, I don't remember my kids that much at that age, but with my grandkids and such, you know, that's when they'll start to let them go in on their own and not worry that they have to go in with them. So I think it was that factor.
Because I can say even, you know, there's, you know, as a parent of 3 boys, this is my reality, right? And so I always think there are times when, for example, I would rather go into a women's restroom knowing that there's no other men in there and send my 10-year-old with my 7-year-old into a women's restroom by themselves. So those are just things that I think about that are tricky and, again, are very personal decisions you have to make, but I don't know who's in the men's restroom. I don't want to send my 10-year-old in there by himself, for example. So again, just something that I'm looking at. Another one is, how would this work, for example? Obviously, these are provisions that are applicable only to private schools, but private schools often join or host events or participate in competitions at public schools. So would these provisions apply if a private school is participating in a sporting competition at a public school?
No.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, just to piggyback on that, you know, as a father of daughters, you know, I don't want my daughters having to go to an establishment knowing that there's potentially males and adult males going to be utilizing facilities that, you know, put them in a potential precarious situation that could be detrimental to their health and their well-being. So I think this is common sense, and it's unfortunate we have to actually pass legislation like this, but I totally understand the attempt. So any further questions? Seeing none. Anyone to testify in support, please come forward. Please remember when you are testifying to fill out a witness form.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Organ Schlim on behalf of David Humphrey. So age 8 is because, real quickly, Senator, it is the age that some girls begin puberty, and therefore we had to choose an age. That one seemed to be the age, so therefore we decided that would probably be the cutoff line for an age because of girls. Boys, 9 years old, girls, 8. This is really, the genesis of this is because the Supreme Court did make a ruling for public schools in 2020, last calendar year, and cited that a person who identified as a different gender than what they were born as could not use the opposite sex locker rooms when in a state of undress, which is what the criteria of this bill is, and therefore this is related to private schools. Wanted to make sure that if there's going to be a lawsuit, there's not one pending now, so before that happened, we wanted to make sure that there was just a statute that said, hey, you can go adopt a policy that separates the boys and the girls K through 12 in your school. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? See none. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else to testify in support?
Hi, Lisa Panette, Armorvine. We love this bill. It's clean. Wish we had more bills like it.
Any questions? See none. Thank you. Anyone else to testify in support?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Dr. Guillermo Villatrueva with the Missouri Catholic Conference, and we would just like to go on the record in support of this bill. We think it's very helpful for Catholic schools and private religious schools in general to have this protection, these guidelines, so we can implement policies that align with both our sincerely held beliefs and with biology. So we appreciate this bill, and if you have any questions, I would like to take them.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? See none.
Thank you.
Anyone else to testify in support? Okay, seeing none. Anyone to testify in opposition, please come forward.
My name is Samantha Jones, and until recently I was a state employee of DESE. I am a priestess, a taxpayer, and an intersex and non-binary person, and I am against SB 1558. In Missouri, there is not a designation on a birth certificate for an intersex person. It is only male or female, and expecting private school students to carry their birth certificate with them to school is ridiculous. It is also a violation of their Fourth Amendment rights, which is against a legal search and seizure, and having children trying to expose their genitals to adults to find out what bathroom or locker room they should be in is a violation of that Fourth Amendment right. It's also a violation of HIPAA, because that is medical information that should be remaining private and not exposed to just anybody. Private schools should not be exempt from providing safe restrooms and locker rooms for their students. It is an incorrect assumption that gender is rigidly binary and that sex is as well. It would be difficult to enforce this rule, and not only excludes transgender children from a blatant form of cruelty and discrimination, but also harms children who are non-binary and gender non-conforming. This bill language also hurts intersex people like me. People with ambiguous genitals, people who have a hermaphroditic genotype and phenotype. Which restrooms should we use? Children want a safe place to use the restroom and change clothes without harassment. This bill is lazily written. It lacks scientific support and harms children. This will cost private schools revenue and does nothing to make children more safe in these environments. This is an excuse to provide private schools the opportunity to discriminate and harm children in their educational spaces, based on the false and anti-scientific definition of sex. Sex is not just determined as chromosomes or the phenotype that is expressed in one's genes, and gender, while an experience that is psychological, is also based in one's body. As I am an intersex person, I was assigned female at birth because they didn't have another choice. And I didn't know that I was intersex until I was an adult. It is expensive and difficult to obtain the testing required to find out if you are intersex, and sometimes even if your chromosomal makeup shows that, you can still have a phenotype that expresses differently than your chromosomes. There are more intersex people in this world than there are people with red hair and born with it naturally. That's how many of us there are. How will this law be enforced? In cases where laws like this are enforced, the result is that more cis women and cis girls, which means children who are identifying with the gender they were assigned at birth, are targeted than women who are transgender, people who are intersex or non-binary individuals. These practices are unenforceable, they're discriminatory, they make restrooms and locker rooms and sleeping quarters inaccessible, and they harm people at every age, not just children, because parents and other people, as Senator Nuremberg noted, that these schools have other events there that will affect adults as much as they'll affect children. Attacking the transgender and non-binary and intersex community is an unnecessary waste of time, tax dollars, and other state resources. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. So you had brought up that you didn't find out you were intersex till you were an adult. So I guess during your schooling, did you just know, or were you instructed or forced to go into a certain bathroom?
Because there were no other gender-affirming bathrooms, I was forced to be in the female locker rooms.
So you were forced, or you just knowingly went in because that's how you were just raised?
It's a complicated discussion, but if I had known that I was intersex younger, I probably would not have been going into the girls' restrooms or locker rooms. I didn't find out until I was 21, and I was in college at the time, and I was attending a girls' college. I was attending Stevens. And as an intersex person, finding out that the way that my reproductive system is built is not the same as every other woman's, definitely made me question what my gender identity was on top of that. I am not able to have children. I was born not able to have children. So the language in this bill where it talks about having that type of reproductive system, that even if I was still identifying with the sex I was assigned at birth, it would still be excluding me and anybody who is like me, because this bill defines whether or not a woman is able to give birth.
You know, back in 2014, I sponsored a bill that would have made sure that boys used boys' locker rooms, girls used girls' locker rooms, and I was told I was totally just ridiculous, that nobody believes this, that you're just searching for a problem. Now all of a sudden it's like we've created this social contagion of no one knows what sex they are, or that it's a construct. But society from all of human history has been male and female.
Actually, that's incorrect.
That's absolutely 100% correct.
No, it is not.
All of society is actually built on the premise of male and female.
No, just
and
the society, Senator.
No,
The Native
no, it's
American-
all
actually,
society.
as a
Hold on,
basis-
I'm speaking. I'm not asking a question. All of society and all of human history, society has been built on the realities of biology, not constructed around a framework of one individual's feeling. And again, you didn't even know till you were 21, and you didn't even think twice about it up until it became a social contagion and popular amongst the world today.
No, actually, it wasn't a social contagion, and it wasn't a popular belief.
What
Excuse
is
me,
today, it's popular, and
See,
it's actually
okay,
waning.
Can I speak, sir, please? First off, I want to address your definition of cultures all around the world and historically believing in biology and separating men and women that way. That is factually incorrect. Ancient Greeks actually believed in hermaphroditus and worshipped a god that had both genitalia. And it was considered to be a sacred being to be of the opposite gender or to be transgender. They recognized that. In the Native American cultures and cultures in Africa, they believe in a third gender. There's a third gender called two-spirit in Native American culture, which means that they believe that there are the spirits of both male and female within one person. And again, they are held as sacred beings. They are members of the clergy, and they provide a moment of spiritual care to them, and wearing the clothes of the opposite sex is part of what they do. In Hinduism, there are gods that transgender and transform their clothes and their outfits and their bodies that are worshipped this way. They have statues that have these hermaphroditic parts, and they worship them too.
But again,
So
what you're bringing
saying
up
that
are things
this
that
is-
are
saying
actual,
that
like,
the
made-up
cultures
gods
are separated
that
by two
aren't true.
genders is incorrect. You cannot say that only this culture is separated by two genders. You can't say it's the world over when it's factually incorrect, because these cultures existed, and they still exist, and they are still worshipped, and they are still considered sacred. And as a Wiccan priestess, I consider these people sacred. It is my duty to harm none. That is what I believe. Harm none and do as thou wilt. These children who are acting in their own bodies and their own spirits with the family support that they have, they aren't hurting anybody by their existence, but you are hurting them by targeting them specifically. If this wasn't an issue in 2014 for you until you wrote that bill, you're the one who found the problem and made it a problem instead of letting these kids just exist without having to be legislated against constantly.
So this is dealing with private schools. So as a parent, I know when I'm putting my child into a certain private institution, there are parameters in which they operate. So,
Yes.
and this is just making sure that we are going to protect the way private institutions operate without being harassed and taken advantage of.
So here's the thing about private schools. Private schools are still subject to federal and state reporting. Private schools still have options to accept state and federal grants. If they're going to be accepting state and federal grants, they have to follow state and federal laws, and they have to follow the laws of the ordinances that they are in. They shouldn't be allowed to discriminate against kids. They're already ridiculously under-oversighted. And as I have worked with DESE, I am aware of the situation on how they are undersighted for their special education children, because that was the office that I worked in. Private schools need to have more oversight, not less, and they shouldn't be allowed to legally discriminate and be able to get around the local ordinances and laws. That's just giving them every ability to not participate and take federal money that should be going to a public school instead. These should be held to the same standard.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else to testify in opposition, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Tatum. I am with Intact. I don't know what else there is to say. I believe that my partner came up here and talked about this matter in a way that, quite frankly, if you can't see the point now, why continue even bringing it up? Private schools should not be exempt from providing safe restrooms and locker rooms for their students. It is an incorrect assumption that gender is rigidly binary and that sex is as well. It would be difficult to enforce this rule without having children expose their genitalia to adults and to be inspected and to determine which restroom and locker room a child would need to use. This is going to do harm to transgender children, but it's also going to do harm to cisgender children that are slightly askew in their presentation. So my question then becomes, what happens when a cisgender individual that is going to school is wrongfully accused of using the right restroom? What happens then? Does the state pour out money for that private school to handle that matter now? Is that what we're talking about? So either way that you look at this bill, the state's going to be footing forward money in this case, and it's going to cause a lot of chaos. I don't think structurally that we should be doing that in our governing bodies. The ability to use the restroom is a fundamental human right. It is a public health issue. Nowhere in this bill is there any location outlined for individuals that identify as neither male or female to use the restroom. If someone had had that test, the same test that my partner has had, if someone has that test at a young age, what do you do then? Does the state also then foot out money for that trial? I'm not familiar with how, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the transplantation of a uterus. And I'll spare everybody the gory details. What is necessary to know is that uterus transplants have been seen a significant success with over 70 live births reported worldwide since the first successful transplant in 2014. So if an individual has a uterine transplant at that age, are they now allowed to use the women's restroom? And if someone sees them come up as a teacher, and they see them as a young boy at first, and then now they're a young girl, and they call them out for using that restroom, what is the state going to do then? So I hope that y'all do the right thing and that you vote no on this bill, or that you at least change the language of this bill so that it will include individuals like me, like my partner, like other individuals that are also going to give testimony today. Thank you for your time.
Isn't it already illegal in the state of Missouri to do any sort of surgery like you just described?
Oh, yeah, sure. But you know what? If somebody leaves the state, if somebody leaves the country, comes back, same name, hasn't been able to change the name on their birth certificate yet, are you going to open yourself up for that as a state body? Are we saying that that's what we're going to do?
Well, I guess we can't control what's occurred, in
No, you
other
can't.
places. But at
Yeah.
the same time, we can control what happens here in the state of Missouri.
Well, this doesn't look
protecting
like
kids.
control, Senator. This actually looks like a mess. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? See none. Thank you. Anyone else to testify in opposition?
Good morning, Sharon Goway-Jones here today on behalf of Promo, Missouri in opposition to the bill. I just wanted to point out that private schools are already immune for lawsuits under Chapter 213, especially if they have a religious component. This bill does nothing except extend the conversation in the legislature that is about the genitalia of our young people. And that is something that we have real concern about. We have already passed bills to address this issue multiple times. We have no issue in Missouri where this will have any practical effect. It is nothing but continuing a conversation that we should frankly move on from and find other things to deal with in this state. There is no practical effect of this bill other than to make students' genitalia the topic of conversation. Thank you.
But that's the thing, it always seems to be, there's one side that just wants to have that discussion and have this discussion with kids behind parents' backs and so on and so forth to confuse kids that would otherwise never even bring these sorts of topics up.
This bill does nothing to change how private schools operate. The whole point of private schools is to avoid what you believe may be happening in public schools, which is what you just described. I don't believe that is happening.
Well, we know that it's happening. We just had a bill a few weeks ago that we had in full force opposition that they feel they have an intrinsic right to have those conversations without parents' knowledge.
Not without parents' knowledge.
No,
sir.
absolutely. And there was a bill to prohibit that they did so to ensure that they had to disclose to parents. And there was numerous people testifying that they should have that right to be able to do so without parents' knowledge, to talk about genitalia, their sexuality with kids. So it's not that we're infatuated with it, it's that we're trying to protect from having those conversations, and that sexuality should not be even on the periphery in any sort of discussion with children. That's the issue at hand, and that's what we're trying to protect. So
The issue with that bill was the broad definitions
it's
of
just
what
broad in
conversations
that, hey,
were
you
blocked,
shouldn't be
and that it
talking
blocked
about
the First
anyone's
Amendment rights of-
sexuality to children, is what the discussion is.
It's not about their sexuality, Senator. It's about having the ability to be a safe adult for children to talk to, and the definitions would have prevented that.
I just had literally, I think it was right before spring break, an individual come testify that they should even have a right to pornography to be able to explore their sexuality, and that it should be a right to do so.
I
And
don't know about that conversation,
Well, I'm
but I
just saying
do
that,
know.
that you say that we're infatuated with it. No,
You
when
are.
we're trying to stop these discussions from happening, they shouldn't be on the topic of anyone's discussion with children.
Senator, if I had a bill for every weird conversation I had with someone, we would have twice as many bills.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Proceed.
Good morning, Sharon. I
Good morning.
appreciate you being here this morning, and thank you for stating so eloquently that, first of all, that this legislation really isn't necessary, that private schools are already protected from lawsuits. And again, bringing back the point that here in the Education Committee, we have spent a tremendous amount of time talking about these issues. And I can say for the last 6 years, working in the education committees, both in the House and the Senate, I am sick and tired of talking about bathrooms. And I wish we could spend a heck of a lot more time talking about classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? See none. Thank you. Anyone else to testify in opposition, please come forward.
Good morning. My name is David Lee Brush with the Missouri Equity Education Partnership, and we echo everything that has been said already. We've been testifying against bills like this for a long time. We are firmly on the record as in opposition to these bills. And the issue that is at the heart for us is twofold. One, we understand that private schools are protected and that they can set the rules as they want, but like Senator Nuremberg said, they are occasionally public spaces for a variety of activities. Sometimes they're even rented out. And that dovetails in with the other issue of enforcement. We've been talking about how are these bills going to be enforced, and nobody can seem to give a clear answer. In a previous hearing on this, a similar bill in the House, they said, well, you know, if somebody makes a fuss, then we'll know. And what that does is that opens up a lot of confusion, because someone could be tall or well-built or well-muscled and be, I don't like the word accused, because you are accused of doing wrong things. Being transgender is not wrong, but being identified as being transgender when you're just a tall woman who's well-muscled. I've personally seen that happen in another situation, and it was very uncomfortable for everybody. What recourse would that woman have had it gone to that? Because she was denied, could have been denied use to the restroom, and it's just humiliation. And that's kind of at the crux of everything. We think that there should be accountability if people are humiliated like that. And the reality is, everyone has gone to the bathroom with someone who is transgender at some point in their life, and you haven't known it, because the only real way to know is if you examine genitalia. And if you're doing that in the bathroom, then you are the problem. And so we've already experienced this, and it's been fine. And it's been fine for years and years and years. So I don't understand why we have to keep talking about it, but as long as you're going to bring it up, I will drive the 2.5 hours from home in the dark to come here and talk about how silly this idea is, and can we please talk about fully funding the foundation formula instead? Thank you.
Further questions? See none. Thank you. Anyone else to testify in opposition, please come forward.
Yes, I'm Susan Renee Carter from Columbia, Missouri, and I'm providing testimony today in opposition to Senate Bill 1558 on behalf of LGBTQIA children and their families who are being bullied, isolated, and denied access to public and private spaces. This bill will allow for a legalized form of bullying and erasure of trans children. While private and charter schools have long avoided accountability in ways expected of public schools, They are now lobbying for funding, tax credits, and grants that belong to public schools. Additionally, they want to avoid liability for actions that fall under discriminatory regulations as outlined in this bill. I do not support this heinous request. LGBTQIA students deserve the same rights and accommodations as the rest of the students. If the private and charter schools want the same funding streams as public schools, they should have to meet the accreditation, certification, and licensures, as well as being expected to provide equal access and accommodations for all children applying and attending their schools. If they are requesting special legislation that does not meet constitutional standards, they should be denied. As a supporter and advocate for the LGBTQIA community, I find this proposed legislation offensive and an attempt to promote violence against members of the trans community. I do not support this legislation and demand a no vote on Senate Bill 1558. I stand against the hate being spread against our trans community. Children deserve love and care, not the hate these sort of actions spread. Thank you.
Any questions? See none, thank you. Anyone else testify in opposition, please come forward.
Hello. My name is Kathleen Lee Brown. However, I go by Keith Brown. Even my dad calls me that. All right. So on this interesting quote that is scientifically incorrect, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from Columbia College, and it's a study in gender affirming care, as well as the importance to refute sexual dimorphism. Your claims that there is a binary, one male, one female, that is not correct, scientifically or factually. We have a thing called intersex people, 1 in 200 births, as many as we have redheads, by the way, have intersex characteristics at birth. And as well as, one thing very important about that, it's legal for a doctor to play with the numbers a little bit and have surgery on an infant when they're born with those characteristics. Just to fit in to the binary. Many times what this leads to is, around puberty, right? The bill, 8 years old, right? Okay. So if we think about it that way, at 8 years old, a child could start exhibiting intersex characteristics as puberty happens, which is what happens. Your body starts to gain sexual characteristics around the time they start puberty. So what could happen at 8 is they start developing them, even though they've been, surgically operated on without their knowledge as an infant, which is legal. Even though they could start exhibiting those traits, facial hair, cystic fibrosis, whatever it be. There's tons of different intersex characteristics. They could start developing those at 8 and then get bullied already on top of that. They don't know who they are because they were operated on as a child, and then grow and be bullied and not be sure about where they're supposed to use the restroom. I have friends who exist now today who have this issue with and had this issue with being bullied, not sure where they should go. By putting this law, this bill in, 1558, this would discriminate against intersex children. We could argue about trans rights and where we're supposed to go to the bathroom all day, and I'm going to be there for, as a trans person. But we also need to talk about this biological, surgical component that we are just dismissing because of a belief that is untrue. We're talking about science, biology, which was my favorite course. So, I, Keith Brown of Trans Liberation Columbia, do not support this bill and oppose this bill. Any questions?
Yeah, so you had brought up the quote, I guess, saying that there's no binary aspect to biology, but there's anomalies, and nobody. It's
not an anomaly.
Well, hold on. There's anomalies, and there's the exception to what is the biological norm. But if you still test and you still look at the actual biological makeup of even someone who does have intersexual parts, they still ascribe to either male or female.
That's not
100% of the time. That's absolutely 100%
that is
biological
not true.
fact.
I just explained to you why that's not true, which is the surgical implementation of gender.
Surgical. So that's counter to biology. It's you having to go in and do extra superficial work to an individual to change.
Right, you're
Now,
saying
you may
that it's
have
okay for that to happen when a doctor kind of fibs the numbers a little bit because he wants that child to fit into the binary and then does surgery on a child. So, I mean, we're talking infants, like 6 months old, okay? We're not talking like grown children making a choice. No. This
Yeah,
is
but what you're trying to muddy the water into the
It's not me.
reality. It is muddying the water.
Are you calling redheads an anomaly, sir?
What's that?
Are you calling redheads a biological anomaly?
Well, everybody is biologically different in some
Yes, but are you, that's not my question. My
extent.
question is,
Well,
are you calling redheads a biological anomaly?
Well, you're trying to throw up redheads, but they're either male or female.
No, sir.
So-
Redheads are a normal thing, 1 in 200 births.
So is somebody with blue eyes, somebody with brown eyes, so is somebody, but
Right.
regardless, they
But
are
so are
going to.
intersex people. People born with different sexual characteristics, different chromosomes. Biologically, there are so many aspects of intersexuality and chromosomes, like Down syndrome is a different chromosome.
Well, sure, there's an additional chromosome, but
we
they
wouldn't
still have a
right.
biological
Are you going to tell
makeup
those
of a
people with
gender.
different chromosomes or genders on their birth certificate, intersex children, that they can't use a bathroom in their school? Because that's what this bill does.
Well,
And you're calling redheads an anomaly because they're 1 in 200 births just
well,
as
just because
intersex.
you've latched onto a redhead
I'm just saying,
talking point,
it's the
that
same
doesn't
thing.
that doesn't
It's a-
change the fact of male or female. So.
There could be male and female, sir. I'm
Any-
well aware as someone who studies biology and neuroscience. However, there is also intersex and transgender people, and brain scans in 2025, 2026 are supporting the study that trans people exist through their scans of their brain, different aligned to their birth. Their study of intersex children, 1 in 200 births, that's again, the same amount as redheads. There are that many people with intersex characteristics. So, again, you are erasing a whole portion of the Missouri community. You know, we can sit here and hash numbers all you want, but I'm going to be honest, with the degree set that I study and focus in and plan to get my master's in, that's not true, and I want that to be very much on record, that intersex people exist, and 3-gender binary does not. The 2-gender binary does not.
Okay. Any questions? See none. Thank you. Anyone else
Thank
to
you for your time.
testify in opposition? You can leave your testimony for your support afterwards. We've already done that.
Good morning, Senator Bratton, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Stack. I'm testifying on behalf of the Mid-Missouri Fellowship of Reconciliation. It's part of the International FOR and Interfaith Peace and Civil Liberties Group founded in 1914. Yeah, it does feel like there's been a lot of political grandstanding on this issue, as was mentioned by Senator Nurnberg and others. You know, there are so many needs that Missourians have. Proper education, housing for all people in the state. There are tens of thousands of people on our streets without shelter. All kinds of other health care issues, all kinds of things that could be focused on. But this issue continues to be coming up before you folks again and again and again. I'm striving to practice tolerance myself, tolerance, patience, and indeed unconditional love for all members of our human family, including for sponsor of the bill and its proponents, people who are exhibiting intolerance and what feels to me to be cruel public policy, striving to isolate and dehumanize other human kin of ours, people who have transitioned from the gender of their birth to one with which they identify. SB1558 is the latest in a long line of legislative measures aimed at making people, in this case, our trans siblings, suffer. It's really mean-spirited legislation. We oppose it vehemently. About a generation ago, our nation seemed on the verge of a real societal awakening when there was greater acceptance and indeed celebration of people being allowed and encouraged to be their authentic self. For myself, I was born male, and I'm comfortable with that. I've met dozens of people, many of them now my friends, who feel discomfort or felt discomfort with being bound by the gender of their birth. I'm nothing like a scholar on the topic. Other folks have talked more about it, more eloquently than I am, with greater knowledge. But I understand the construct of gender is more fluid than many of us, including this 67-year-old man, comprehends. We should not be in the business in a theoretically small d democratic society of limiting freedom and access to necessary accommodations to people because of their personal agenda, or gender rather. Everyone has to use the toilet, including students. We should not make especially trans students who, like all young people, are already going through awkward changes, make the process of growing into adulthood all the more difficult. You know, public or private schools, I mean, segregation was ruled out for people because of race a long while ago, and we need to kind of continue to follow that. As was mentioned before, there are contracts and public funding going to these schools. We need to keep that in mind. You know, it would seem much more enlightening to treat all people as we would a guest in our own house. We don't have separate bathrooms for people of different genders, just a facility for any person visiting us. Public and private schools should make available gender-neutral restrooms whenever feasible, and it may take some challenging and vital discussions, but trans kids should be accommodated for in changing and locker rooms. Such an evolution constitutes yet another step in making this nation a more perfect union. I'd encourage you to please vote against this measure. Let it not go out of this committee. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else testify in opposition? Okay, seeing none. Anyone to testify for informational purposes?
My name is Byron Clemens. I'm here to testify as a private citizen. I was here for the other bill that's coming up later, but I felt compelled to come up and give some information. I have a cabin in Crawford County. It has an outhouse. My extended family's Navajo. They have outhouses as well. I have toilets in my home. None of them are genderized, and I do not quite understand why big government would want to genderize toilets. Thank you.
Are you testifying in opposition?
No, for information.
I think you probably need to do for opposition with your testimony. All right. Anyone else for informational purposes? Sir, can you fill that out at your chair and then turn that in afterwards, please?
Sure.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, State Public Advocate. I turned in my witness form online electronically. And I just want to go over a few issues. I think a lot of people are missing the point on this bill. First of all, Senate Bill 1558 is for protection of the safety of children and adults in restrooms in a private school setting. The second issue is it protects private schools from civil liability lawsuits. And the third issue, it prohibits any city, any village, or any county in Missouri from passing any ordinance or any promulgated rule or regulation or policy taking away the right of a private institution of how to designate their restrooms. And the last point of this bill is it's clearly stated that the choice is up to the private institution of how they want to regulate and run their private restrooms on their own private property at their private institution. Now, I've been in restrooms, as a matter of fact, all across our state, and I've been shocked a number of times. I think that if you're a man, if you're born a male, that you should use a male restroom. If you're born a female, you should use a female restroom. I've been shocked a number of times, and I think that it needs to be the safety of children, it needs to be the safety of male adults, and the safety of female adults. I don't want to be surprised anymore in a public restroom or a public area. And that's my testimony for information on SB 1558. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else for informational purposes only? Okay. Senator, do you have any closing remarks?
No. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 1558. We are going to go to House Committee Substitute for House Bill 2710. Representative Diehl, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Dane Diehl, District 125, Bates, Vernon, Cedar County, here to present House Bill 2710. Before I start, I do not have any redhead statistics embedded in this bill, so I tried to think of a few and sitting in the room, but I couldn't come up with any to mind. So I apologize. I'll do a little more homework on that. House Committee Substitute for House Bill 2710, familiarity to the committee, is the A through F bill that it's known as. I view this more as a transparency bill. The House Committee Substitute remains true to its merits of a simplistic program that most all of the parents are accustomed to across the state. A through F grading scale, one that we think will help drive proficiencies across the state and lead to better outcomes, and also give DESE the latitude to implement this program and make sure that it's done in a way that is easily accessible and one that holds everyone to the same regards. This bill uses parameters that are already collected, many that are already collected through the MSIP-6. It does add a growth to grade level metric in there that will be used in calculations. The House Committee Sub focused more on what I would call technical changes to try to get it right, and work through the Education Committee on the House side to really make some of those changes for implementation and making sure it's streamlined. It does still have the incentive piece in there that was important to me to get through the House, one that we've done a lot of work on. There is desire for that to be tied to more of the growth aspect than anything else through multiple conversations. We did exclude the special school districts, and with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Proceed.
Okay, so this is the A through F, correct?
Yes, sir.
I don't have a problem with the A through F. We grade kids all the time. I think it motivates. You know, if your kid comes home and they've got a C+ at quarter, you say you're better than that. You can get it up higher. You can get it up to be a B+. But my one issue with it, I like what we're doing. You've got a growth model in there. I like that. Is at the end, the majority of it is on what?
The MAP test. Yep.
The MAP test. Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you think the MAP test, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I guess I am a little bit. Do you think the MAP test is actually a good test?
I think it's what we have. It's one standard that we have that can be looked at year after year. Now, I know there's metrics, and we talked about on the floor of, intersession map testing. And my understanding through working with DESE is there are some pilot programs out there that allow the teachers to test throughout the year, make adjustments. I think that would be very beneficial to most education across the state.
Yeah, my problem with the MAP, as you know, I worked in education for a long time. I've probably yet to talk to a student, a parent, a teacher, a community member says, that's just a great test. We think it measures everything we want it to measure. It just does everything, and the information we get, because it's kind of an autopsy at the end of the year. You take it at the end of the year, the kids kind of figure this session's over, and then you don't get the results to the next year, but when you get the results, those kids have already moved on to the next grade, so they're not even there once you get the results. And my point is, I like what we're doing. What I wish we had was something such as benchmark testing for this bill of yours. An example, I'll give you an example of what I mean. I'm the teacher, and I give my kids this benchmark test at the end of the first quarter, and they're a C. And I'm going, oh, that's not good. That's not where I want my kids to be. They can do this, this, and this, but they can't do these things. That's not good. Would that motivate the teacher? And I think the answer is yes. I'm not going to try to get you to answer the question. I think the answer is yes, at C. Would it motivate the kids? Because they say, I'm a C right now. Now they take it at semester and they're a B-. We've seen progress. My kids are doing better. And we do it. That's why I have a problem with the MAP test. It's an autopsy at the end of the year. And if we did something where we benchmark them along, now we get some real progress. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think, and there was a lot of conversations around that. I think we tried to use what we did have and one that we could look at year after year. I also believe that the benchmark would be great, and there's some House bills that focus on that metric. And I said, hey, my bill does not touch on that, but I think that would be something that would be beneficial to the teachers on that aspect throughout the school year.
If the intention of the bill, which I think it is, I think the intention of the bill is to make us a better educational system. This is why we brought in MSIP decades ago. We brought in MSIP to try to force progress in the schools, and I think it did some of that. I think it made us better, made schools better in many ways. If this bill is going to do that, I don't think it can do it with the MAP. And I'm not going to keep prolonging on this. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just don't think it can happen with the MAP test. If you get to a benchmarking test, now I see where this can, and I think I tried to point it out, this could bring us along and actually bring some real progress. So I just wish we could come up with a way. I'm not going to quit harping. People have heard me say it numerous times. I think the MAP test is kind of a useless autopsy at the end of the year. I'm not saying there's not some validity to it, but we don't really use it. They're gone. The kids are gone to the next grade. The teachers have gone home for the summer, and the results don't come in until they come back the next year. So I just wish we could find a better method. Thank you.
Any further questions for the representative? Senator Nirenberg.
Good morning, Representative.
Good morning.
Okay, I appreciate Senator Henderson's comments. We've had these conversations many times, and I feel much the same in terms of the map. I think it's a terrible tool right now, and I think it's really important that in order to measure students' growth, which we need to be doing, we need a better tool, and it's really tough for me to tie any sort of incentive to a flawed tool, okay? So looking at this a little bit, and I want to dig into the fiscal note because I also have concerns about how much this is going to cost the state. I certainly support as much transparency as we can in terms of schools, and parents and guardians have an understanding of where their students are in terms of achievement. I'm very supportive of adding, even though the map is flawed, I'm supportive of adding that additional metric to the map results to say, are you at grade level or not? And that's something DESE's asked for. This is creating a whole new system, essentially, and that is what is spelled out in the fiscal note, that this is going to cost DESE a heck of a lot of money when we have a recommendation from the governor not to fully fund the formula. And so I guess just basically, where's the money going to come from for the performance incentives, and where's the money going to come from to overhaul ITSD in order to be able to do this? And so we're looking at, possibly in excess of $2.5 million for fiscal year 27, and then, in excess of $500,000 in perpetuity. Where does the money come from, Representative?
Yeah, so the money, and I think that when I look at that fiscal note, I think that, and talking to the department, it might be FTEs to help make sure this technology implementation, development would be probably some of those costs associated. If they did I would hope that there's some people in the department that can help develop this and make sure that it's streamlined and rolled out. And if not, the fiscal note would be hiring those to make sure that it is done correctly. But I think, to me, the investment in making sure that it is done correctly is imperative to make sure that when I look at some of the other states that have it, that have a landing page that's very interactive, that does a good job, that conveys the principles that we want to get out to them, I acknowledge that there is an investment on that end. As far as where we're going to get the money, I think that, most all the bills we have here in this building has some sort of cost associated with them, and we'll just have to make sure that the department's funded.
Okay. Well, I would love to see not just the department funded, but truly our neighborhood schools fully funded. And that's my fear, is that we continue to grow bureaucracy. We continue to grow administration, overhead for administration. At the same time, we're putting less resources directly into the classroom. And I can say, as somebody who taught for 13 years, A through F is a terrible system as we have it, right? I could have a kid that knew way more who was getting a C in my class than the kid that got an A. And again, that's why I don't love this tool. I see what it's done in other states, and I'm not seeing what I think we all really want to see is we want to see growth. We want to see students perform at higher levels, and I'm not sure that this bill does anything to get us there. So thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Seeing none, we'll now take testimony in favor of this bill. Welcome. I see it looks like you've got a witness form filled out. Please
sir.
State your name and begin when ready.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I am Maury Scott. I am here in favor of HB 2710. I am from Missouri Charter Schools. I am an advocate, fellow, and contractor. Our neighborhood encompasses an area of North St. Louis that once had several schools actually in walking distance for families blessed to purchase homes there. In that era, parents simply trusted that the schools in their areas were qualified to safely house and instruct their most precious possessions during the school day. As with all things life, time brings about a change. We're now blessed with the Missouri Charter Schools, which offers endless opportunities for our children and grandchildren. I'm here in support of HB 2710, which requests accountability measures for elementary and secondary schools. This bill asks the State Board of Education to assign a rating of A through F each public school and its district, taking into account academic achievements as assessed through the Missouri Assessment Program. It also requests establishment of the Show Me Success Program, which would award financial rewards to schools showing academic growth and high performances. Please note that the requested checks and balances required already exist and are fully exercised within the charter school infrastructure. I'm here to request that as a body of those in a position to make profound decisions for those who cannot, should we strive for unity as opposed to division and stand for a bill such as this, which is requiring accountability for schools in charge of our children's education. We can actually be on course to leave this educational system in a better place for those we will leave behind. One of my favorite quotes is from Marcus Aurelius. He was a biographer, emperor of Rome in 161 to 180 AD. If it's not right, don't do it. And if it's not true, don't say it. I thank you for your time this morning. Have a blessed day.
Senator Henderson.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot again, but I'm going to ask you a simple question. Do you think the MAP test is a good test, or do you think doing something along the quarters that would help teachers actually see the progress of their kids as they move through the year would be better for this?
I believe that the MAP test, when originally phased in, did what it was supposed to do. In this day and time, it needs to be tweaked. We need to have changes to it in order to better track our children's progress. I do agree with that part of it.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness to testify in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Scott Swain, representing the Missouri Public Charter School Association. Senator Henderson, you and I have chatted about this before regarding the MAP, and Senator Nernburn, I look forward to conversations in the future. I think both of you are spot on. We need to know, is the kid smarter, the young person smarter in May than they were in September when they headed into school? There are certainly ways to do that. I've seen bills through this General Assembly before. We think this is a good start. We want to have that conversation about the MAP. We'll roll up our sleeves and do that. I think it's, to the chairman or to the sponsor's point, it's what we have now. And so we think it's a good idea and want to go on record in favor.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Henderson.
You knew I was going to say something. I agree with you, Scott, and we have had that conversation. And I think the bill's a good idea. I'm right with you. Schools shouldn't be afraid of being accountable, just like we make students accountable every day. We give them grades. Sure. I just think we could do better. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for testimony. Next witness to testify in favor. Welcome. Please make sure you've got a witness form filled out. State your name and begin when ready.
Good morning. My name is Rissa Gray. I am a retired Missouri public school teacher. I'm a representative also of Activate Mo, an organization that empowers parents and strengthens education by mobilizing communities across our state. I would like to speak in support of Senate Bill 2710 as it applies to the schools across the state of Missouri. Like many people, I grew up with a simple A through F grading system. It's easy to understand. My parents could instantly see how I was doing in school, usually not well, just by looking at my report card, and there were no complicated explanations needed. I believe the same and the clear system would help parents understand how their child's school is performing. It would be especially helpful for parents who are new to the state of Missouri, new to the school district, or trying to find their best educational option for their children. As a retired teacher, I spent years in the classroom and I saw firsthand how important accountability and transparency are for students, parents, and our taxpayers. Parents deserve a clear and simple information so that they can make informative decisions about their child's education. An A through F system makes it easy to see what schools are doing well and where improvement can be used. It also helps school districts identify areas of growth and improvement while recognizing the areas where they have succeeded. Over the years, I have seen too many children fall behind because families did not have a clear information about the school performance. I've also seen families forced to make major life changes just to find better educational opportunities for their children. It's difficult for students, parents, schools, employers, and our state. Through my work with Activate Mo, I regularly speak to parents who want to be more involved in their child's education, but feel they have the lack of accessible information about their school's performance policies. To improve transparency, this policy would improve transparency to help parents become stronger partners in education. At the same time, as someone who has spent many years in the classroom, I encourage lawmakers to ensure that accountability systems also recognize the complexity of teaching and learning. Student success is influenced by many factors, and educators must be supported with tools and necessary resources to help every child succeed. Missouri families, teachers, and students all benefit when we have a system that is clear, fair, and focused on student growth. I thank you for your time and the opportunity to share my perspective as a retired teacher, a parent, a grandparent, and a representative of Activate Mo.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Proceed.
Just one question. You brought it up. It measures growth. And this may be for you or the sponsor, but schools have to post this. Is it by October 1st or December 1st? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's embargoed in October and then posted, I believe, the 1st of November.
1st of November. And that's another point of the MAP test is it's given at the end. They don't get the results back. So the school's already full flush going on. Where if we did some kind of a benchmarking test, they could know it, work on it in the summer, because that growth model, I agree with you. But right now, we take that test that's an autopsy at the end, and we don't even know where they're at until schools, they're into the second quarter. So that's just one of my concerns.
September 15th, embargoed, and October 31st.
October 31st. I knew it was somewhere around there. Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony. Anyone else testify in support?
Good morning, members of the committee. Garrett Webb, registered lobbyist for Aligned. Aligned is a coalition of business and civic leaders dedicated to workforce-centered education opportunities across Missouri and Kansas. We support the bill for many of the reasons already mentioned, but primarily because of its informed decision-making power and its alignment with accountability and relatable understanding to real-world outcomes. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Anyone else to testify in support? Okay, seeing none. In opposition?
Good morning, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Otto Fajan on behalf of Missouri NEA. Do want to speak in opposition to House Bill 2710. Want to honor some of the questions and the commentary from the committee this morning. It actually is kind of illuminating. One of the things that we believe is that a fair and efficient accountability system should produce interpretable and actionable results. And right now we have a mess. We have multiple systems. This adds another one, which is just kind of like the APR system already. We have federal accountability. And the question, Senator, you asked the question about the MAP test. Every member of this committee last year voted in favor of Senate Bill 360. One of its provisions said that we are going to change the MAP test, and it's going to be used only for the purpose of federal compliance. The federal compliance is actually the interesting one because that actually does have a system that is intended to produce actionable and interpretable and actionable results. Senator Henderson, as Representative Henderson, you sponsored the bill that passed the Turnaround Schools Act. So under the federal accountability system, we have a metric which the department basically doesn't talk about in public, but they're required under federal law to talk about it in terms of identifying schools for either targeted or comprehensive improvement. And the Turnaround Act is precisely the tool which we put the money into. It would be addressing the things brought up by that policy. Broadly speaking, though, the whole MAP test demanded by the feds in just a couple of subjects took Missouri off course because we had the MAP test in the 90s when it came into being under Senate Bill 380. Every year the department brought out another subject. One of the things that we've seen over the last 30 years is a narrowing of the curriculum. Nowhere in the standardized testing does civics, American history, none of that is valued in our assessment system. And lo and behold, it doesn't really get the emphasis that it ought to. This system also doesn't connect to all of the state work the state's been doing in the last few years on early grades literacy. And so we don't think that this is really the kind of improvement that we think that what you all were working on last year in Senate Bill 360, which every member of the committee voted for and the Senate sent to the House, was a much better direction. Acknowledging that the federal law exists, acknowledging that you have to do that unless you want to give up the federal money, and some states have flirted with considering that. But redesign the MAP test, use it for the actionable federal results, but then emphasize a local accountability system that spans the curriculum with some guidance from DESE and how that's structured. So we think that this is potentially a lost opportunity, continuing to go down the road that clearly has a flawed theory of change. When you have the opportunity to really dig back into it, do some of the work that the Senate was already doing last year and bring that forward to a system that actually is an improvement program, not something that's just a grading scale, but labeled as an improvement program. Happy to answer any questions.
Proceed.
I don't know if I agree with you on everything, but I agree with you on a lot of it. I think my biggest concern is what I think you said. Don't tell me if I'm correct. We're using a flawed test that I think most people think is flawed in the MAP to put greater emphasis on something because we want accountability, but it doesn't really do what I think is intended in the bill because it's, like I said, it's at the end of the year. We don't think it measures everything that we probably want it to.
This legislature on both chambers is seeing the consequences all over the map of school function. And you're exactly right, and that's our point, is that we need to seriously redesign the MAP test concept, and this bill does not do that. It just piggybacks on top of that.
Questions? See none. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else testify in opposition, please come forward.
Lisa Panette, Armor Vine. I thought we were opposed to Common Core. That's what I thought, as conservatives. Because when I go out and I go to the conservative, Republican stuff, I hear people say they're against Common Core. A through F is an extension of Common Core with Jeb Bush and Bill Gates. These tests, to your point, we can't even see them after administered. No one can see them. We've come time and time again as parents, teachers, superintendents. We're administering a test that no one can see. And now we want a grading system based upon a test that no one can see. The Gates Foundation funded the development of these standards and pushed for their adoption across state governments. For these reasons, because we oppose Common Core, we oppose this bill.
No, I would agree with the MAP testing. We've had ample testimony on that, but as a grading scale far exceeds Gates Foundation. I mean, that's been the metric of measure for students and alike. Moving to a system of which everyone understands, I don't see that as nefarious or some backdoor approach by any organization. I see this as just making it to where people have an understanding. Now, again, I totally agree with the map testing and looking at how we evaluate and do things differently there. I totally agree with that. But moving to a grading scale that people understand, I don't see as any sort of nefarious anything.
If you look at A through F, and this, like what we have before us, this is the Bill Gates model before you. So if you wanted to do a common sense, I think everybody could get behind a common sense metric with tests that we can see and that we can measure and that we had as kids. We could get behind that, but that's not what's before us.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else to testify in opposition?
My name is David Lee Brush. I'm with the Missouri Equity Education Partnership. Good morning again. We oppose this bill for mainly because we believe it's going to widen an equity gap because the incentives are upside down. We reward the schools that are doing well, and we penalize the schools that are not doing well because we think that education should be based on a competition model. And we don't believe that the competition model is an appropriate model for education systems. They are a service. So to give more money to schools that are being successful is going to, the money has to come from somewhere, and it's going to hurt the schools that are struggling, that need the support. And it's like competition needs an even playing field, and this is making the playing field a little bit more uneven. A to F is very familiar to people, but there's a big problem with A to F when you use the deciles, because there's a giant difference between an 80% B and an 88% B. You can go from an 80% B to 88% and have increased 8%, but that is not reflected anywhere. That's why we started adding pluses and minuses. Also, you can go from a 79% C to an 80% B and show growth when it's been 1% growth. So that reporting system has always been flawed. I would love to talk your ear off about grading scales someday, but this is not that moment. With the MAP test to get ahead of a question I might be asked, I am old enough I taught MMAT testing. Well, I gave MMAT testing. That's how long I've been teaching, since 1988. I was there when we wrote the MAP tests. I helped write the MAP test because we were going to test everything, like Otto said, and I was excited about the MAP test. And I don't get excited about any tests, but I was excited about this opportunity. And then the MAP test was implemented, and it was okay for a while until it became all about the numbers, which is fine, but we need to start looking at scale scores, not just decile scores, and to show true growth, because the part of the MAP test's impetus was to test curriculum. Are we teaching the curriculum with fidelity? So you would look at the test, but like the previous witness said, we didn't even get to see the test. We could see the test questions if we had to erase marks by it, or if a kid had a question about it and we could pronounce a word in that question, but we didn't sit there and peruse the test. We weren't supposed to. And so we would get our scores back in October when it was too late. And I was the data chairman for my school, so I saw that I had access to Crystal Access. I saw all the test scores. Here's the problem. When you've got a criteria of defining, drawing conclusions, making an inference, and all these other things, you have a question number 5 where you get a 0 on that. Nobody got that question right. And it's drawing conclusions, making, problem solution, or making an inference. But question 17, it's the same criteria, but you don't know which one of those things to teach better, because it's really hard to teach it's very different to teach drawing conclusions, making those 3 things. That's an ELA problem, and has been, and I have been screaming about that for about 30 years now. Can we disaggregate that data out like we do the math? But we don't. The MAP test doesn't give us the information that we need to be able to do what we need it to do, to be able to show the growth and improvement. So not only is the map flawed, it's going to be now used to measure achievement and growth in a flawed way for this flawed bill, which has upside-down funding. So the idea behind this bill is good, and we do need to make improvements. And but I don't think that this is the vehicle that's going to get us there, and it's certainly not going to do it and help schools that are struggling financially as well as academically, because sometimes academic and financial go hand in hand. Thank you.
You had mentioned that you don't like competition, and I guess, can you elaborate on that? I guess, because we teach everyone that they have to compete in every aspect of all society. But I guess, so maybe I misunderstood what you were meaning.
No, you did not misunderstand me. I am services like fire protection districts and police districts and all ambulance districts are all funded with property taxes like public schools are. They're all services. Public schools are a service. We don't have a competition for our ambulance districts. We don't have competition for our firefighters and our police. Having schools have a competition model exclusively and have us run like a business to be on a paying basis and all this other stuff isn't a really great model to be able to improve education, because the goal of education is to have as many people achieve as possible. And part of this bill, if I misunderstood, I think if I understood part of this bill correctly, so a certain number of schools can achieve this, but a certain number of schools has to fail, like the old bell curve. A bell curve is a flawed model as well. If I am teaching, and I'm teaching to the best of my efforts, my kids should all be getting A's. I'm teaching to a standard. And so you teach to the standard. Schools should have these standards, and to pit one school against another school, especially when funding is on the line, that is not a sustainable model. It's going to, and I think that possibly it's going to harm public education across the board. So I don't think that competition is in every aspect of life. I don't. I
when you're
never have.
talking police and fire, they have standards in which they have to meet. They have post-certification. They have, things that do have requirements to make sure that are meeting them. And I think if they weren't responding to fires correctly and people's houses were burning down or people were dying in the street, they weren't responding to 911 calls, there would be an outcry from the public to revamp or do something different. But if you have a failing public school district that is failing students generationally, we have to do something as well.
No, I agree with you that we have to do something because we're failing the students, but you also don't have, if I don't like the ambulance district, and I'm in Rock Creek and Arnold, if I don't like the Rock Creek, which I do, I love Rock Creek, please don't think I don't, but if I don't like the Rock Creek ambulance district, I can't decide to just call another ambulance district because I live in Rock Creek. It's not a competition between these ambulance districts for my business, for my clientele. Schools are now creating this competition model. And there always has been a competition model between public and private schools. I faced that decision when I brought my son from Jeff City to Arnold. Do I want to send him to the Fox schools, or do I want to find a private school for him? Because my husband bought the house before he knew he was going to have a kid. But anyway, I chose the public school because I did my research, but I did make that choice. So we do have that. But right now, public funding is now going to help support private schools and things like that, and it is making the playing field more unlevel for public schools because we are not even fully funding the formula, which again, can we please talk about fully funding the formula?
Senator, proceed.
I just wanted to kind of get on this conversation if I could for a minute. Isn't that what MSIP and APR basically did decades ago, was they started bringing in some competition?
It did, and that was a problem.
Yeah, see, I don't see it.
I do.
I think competition is great, and I think educators can't shy from competition and being able to compare to where they're at. I don't think we ever have. I've always, when I worked in the field, I like to compare to other districts, and if we didn't measure up, I took that as a challenge, and I think that's what we did with MSIP and APR years ago.
Well, I believe in competition. If you see my fingernails, I got Duke in one hand and BYU in the other because it's March Madness right now. I believe in competition. But I don't believe necessarily that competition in that kind of broad way is the best model for public schools. I think APR is one of the worst things that ever happened to us. I think No Child Left Behind destroyed public education. I was so happy I took a break from teaching between the, right before that really kind of started.
We have 10 minutes left, so.
Okay,
yeah.
very briefly.
Sorry.
Appreciate the conversation. I'm going to go back to a couple things that have been said. Again, it's interesting, the opposition, right, from, I appreciate, I know Lisa with Armorvine said, again, this is strong ties to Common Core. And what happened with Common Core, what's happened with MAP, is we've had a dumbing down of curriculum. We've had a dumbing down of curriculum. And what's happening, and what would continue to happen if we, again, implement this additional tool here, is I think it's going to further handcuff school districts and teachers, and tying kids more to those tablets that we're trying to get them off of, because they've got to take their practice test over and over again because they have to do well when it comes to the test so that the school can get an A. And I hate to say it, but this is going to continue that terribly flawed system of teaching to the test,
and
so that these schools can get an A. And that's not what we want. We've had all of these great proposals out there to get away from that. And again, I really would see this as a lost opportunity. We've had those Education Freedom Acts. We've talked about getting away from that. The last thing that I want to do is tie us down even further to the flawed tests that we have in the state.
And that doesn't even touch on the cottage industry that has sprung up about buy this curriculum, 3 years later buy this curriculum, improve your test scores with this curriculum and that curriculum. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Senator, completely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else testify in opposition? We have 9 minutes, and we have a hard stop, so please don't cover any new ground. Thank you. Or
Thank you, Mr.
cover new
Chairman.
ground, but don't tread the old ground, excuse me.
For the record, Steve Carroll, registered lobbyist here on behalf of the St. Louis Public Schools and on behalf of the Cooperating School District of Greater Kansas City. Don't want to beat a dead horse. Otto pretty much touched on all the points that we care about. The problem, I wish that public education in this state was as easy as a simple letter grade, but not every school is the same. Not every school sets in a neighborhood of wealth. Not every school deals with the same population of students and their backgrounds, and not every school has to deal with high student mobility or high homelessness. And so I think it just wouldn't work the way that it's written. But I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else testify in opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Mike Harris on behalf of the Missouri State Teachers Association go on record against House Bill 2710. MSTA supports accountability systems that genuinely improve student improvement or student learning, and don't disagree that the current accountability system doesn't necessarily work for that. But our adopted resolutions clearly state that we're against legislation that relies on high stakes, test-driven measures to evaluate school performance, and that's what we feel this bill does. It continues to take the MAP test and exemplify that and say this is how schools are doing based on those factors, and doesn't take into things like poverty, staffing shortages, class size, those other things that we know affect student performance. Happy to take any questions.
What would be the ideal metric and how to start evaluating them?
I think, like has been said, using a test that is a through-year test, like we've said, using that test to evaluate school performance is a better way to do it. Taking that MAP test at the end of the year and saying this is the end-all be-all of how schools are doing, we feel like relying on that one measure is the biggest issue with it.
I'm going to kind of ask the same question. If it was a benchmarking test where your teachers could see where they're at the end of the first quarter, second, third, and then they know where they're at the end of the year, you probably can't answer for your group, but you think your group would be a lot more amenable to that?
Yeah, we certainly like the idea that NEA, that Otto had brought up about that through-year test and moving more towards a model like that in Senator Carter's bill from last year to only use the MAP test for federal accountability and come up with something that we can actually evaluate how student learning is going throughout the year, make adjustments, and then use that using that to evaluate us, we feel is a more fair way to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else testify in opposition? We have 5 minutes left, so please be as brief as possible. Thank you.
Understood. My name is Byron Clemens. I'm with the American Federation of Teachers, St. Louis. I'm a retired school teacher and soccer coach. Thank you for your service doing this, Senators. I mean that sincerely for all of you. We think this is not a good bill. I appreciate what the senator said about measuring growth. I think that is one of the things we would look at, but also teacher-driven assessments are part of the package. We give quizzes and tests all year long. We have projects. All those things should be included. This is simplistic, but I find it interesting that it's supported by charter school lobbyists. I just find that it's the opposite of transparency and what we've seen, and setting up a whole separate bureaucracy for charter schools versus public education that now coming over to impact all the schools in the state. So please consider this map is going back to No Child Left Behind and Common Core, and we've already gone through that. I've seen it before. Performance pay, as if a teacher has a toolbox with tools in it they're not using every day in the classroom, that they're going to use performance pay now. I've been holding back something special to get performance pay. We already have performance pay. It was never funded. So thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions? See none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else testify in opposition? Please come forward. Down to 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Arnie C. AC Diehl, State Public Advocate. I submitted my witness form online electronically. Back on February the 4th, I opposed this same bill, HB2710, in the House Education Committee. You know, this system of reporting to Missourians the status of schools keeps changing. It's just reinventing it over and over and over and not getting any better results. Let's allow a chance for the current system to work. I believe the current system was changed about 2 years ago. Let's allow it to work for Missourians and see where we go from there. Sometimes we come up with a brilliant idea and we want to change it without giving a current system ample time to work. This also confuses Missouri parents, and it also confuses new Missourians looking to move to Missouri and looking for a place to enroll their kids in an educational environment, a school district. So I think it's bad for other states that are looking to move to Missouri. Now, as you all know, we need to cut $1 billion from fiscal year 2027 and another billion with a B, from 2028. The fiscal note states $3.6 million over the next 3 fiscal years. 1 additional FTE, full-time employee. Where are we going to cut? We keep adding to our budget and keep growing our government. It's sacrilegious. It's wrong for Missourians. Let's give the current reporting system a way to work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else testify in opposition? We have 2 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. John Barget on behalf of the Kansas City Public School Districts. I will be brief. I think conceptually, Representative Diehl's concept, idea, looks good. I would just say to you that meaningful improvement in school performance takes time. It takes resources, stability. The publicly branding of a school as a D or an F has a very, very strong impact in a community, on teacher retention, et cetera. I do agree with one of the previous witnesses that B is a big range, 80 to 88, and as we're trying to improve, you should be getting kudos for making improvement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else testify in opposition? Okay, seeing none. Anyone for informational purposes only? We have about 1 minute, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Mike Lodewigan on behalf of the Missouri Council of School Administrators. I'm not going to, a lot of the information I was going to give has been covered by a lot of the testimony already. I do think if we were going to have something like this, I think the one thing I do want to add to this is we have to make sure that this is measuring what is actually within the school's capabilities. I'm not going to go into socioeconomics and all of that because I think that's a distraction. But I do think there's a legitimate conversation to be had about measuring a school based on students that don't avail themselves of the system by which we're using to measure them. We are seeing chronic absenteeism around the state. So if we are to move forward, whether it be with the new MSIP or A through F or whatever this is, I think that is a reasonable conversation to be having that doesn't put too much on the school and does not put the school in the position to have to go get kids, call a prosecutor, all of those sort of things that go on whenever kids are not in school. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right. We're already past time.
I'll be very quick. Caitlin Whaley with Missouri School Boards Association. Again, not going to retread any ground. As Mike said, if we're going to go down this path with A through F, one portion that we think is important, if we're going to set this on top of the MAP system, we need to ensure that there's parity in the rules that all schools using this accountability system abide by. There are currently different MAP testing rules between charter schools and public schools, and we need to bring those into parity if we're going to set the system on top of that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none. Anyone else? Informational purposes. Okay, seeing none. Closing remarks.
I just wanted to say, we looked at an executive order from January 13th, trying to make that executive order better through the legislative process. Looking forward to carrying on those conversations on this side of the building. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes the hearing, and we are adjourned.